I went home and I just couldn't stop thinking about her.
When you're in country and you're sitting still and idle, that's a bad sign.
She no longer had a heartbeat. She wasn't breathing. That was the first one on the chest. I started compressions first.
Need advocates. We need people that are going to hold companies, government, hold these people accountable.
Welcome to the Heroes Debrief. We're setting out to provide a platform for veterans and first responders to tell their stories. This production has been brought to you by Hero Services, which is a local nonprofit to West Michigan. I'm your host, Jordan White, United States Navy veteran, current working paramedic, and I am here with Tom Kelsch, who is a Marine Corps veteran and a current working nurse. Due to the nature of this podcast, we want to make sure that you're aware to not have any little kids in the area of being able to listen to this, due to the fact of the nature of the content can be for adult audiences only. So, Tom, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you grew up at prior to you enlisting, and start there.
Sure. I grew up in a small town of Muskegon called Wolf Lake, Eggleston Township. It's East Muskegon. I went to Oak Ridge High School. Early on as a kid, I always knew that I wanted to be a Marine and I wanted to serve my country. My dad was a Marine Corps veteran. Most all my uncles were veterans. And that's just my whole livelihood. I just knew I was going to be a Marine.
So how was that your livelihood? Like, obviously you had your family members, a pretty significant history there, a legacy pretty much as far as being Marines. Like, how did that affect you growing up?
It gave me some structure. I knew that in the end, that's where I was going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
But the bad part about that was I didn't care about school. I just wanted to pass and then go in the Marine Corps.
You're right.
And I missed out on a lot of educational opportunities per se, and it affected me later on, but I guess we'll get into that later. But
yeah, because that's an interesting story in itself too. But yeah, so anything significant happened while you were in school, or just kind of went through the motions?
Just went through the motions. I had some pretty good mentors, my football coaches and weightlifting coaches that I had in high school. They kind of kept me on track. I was a very troubled kid because I just didn't care. You know what I mean? I was going to go in the Marine Corps. I just was kind of lost a little bit through high school. But they kind of kept me in check.
Yeah.
And, to this day, I'm greatly thankful for them for doing that.
With your weightlifting, like that was pretty significant in itself. When did you start that?
I started that at a young age because I was really small. And I always knew that I had to get bigger to be a Marine. And I wanted to be strong enough to where I could handle the Marine Corps. So I started weightlifting probably at the age of around 11. And I was so obsessed with it. I'd go to the grocery store and I'd beg my mom and dad to buy that Muscle and Fitness or that Flex magazine. I tried to read it and I just tried to learn everything that I could. And then when I got in high school, ninth grade, we actually had a football coach, brand new to coach the JV team. And he was a power lifter.
Mm-hmm.
And he took me under his wing, and the rest is history.
So at the age of 11, you wound up starting to lift. That's pretty early in itself. So how did that, when you wound up actually going into boot camp, like, how'd you do in boot camp?
Boot camp was fine.
Yeah.
Strength wise, I was probably stronger than almost everybody in my platoon.
I'd imagine.
I had absolutely no problems physically.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally, a few areas beat me down, because the Marine Corps, they're going to bust you. The Marine Corps, that boot camp, you will break down at some point, and they will find that weak point, and they'll make that your strong point.
Mm-hmm. So how'd they bust you down to find your weak point?
They busted me down with swimming. I couldn't swim.
Okay.
So I went to Marine Corps. I could not swim. I tried and tried, but I sink like a rock. I do the dead man's float, and I actually float about a foot from the top of the water.
Yeah.
So I had to go through remedial swimming with 4th Recon, because they teach you how to swim, and it was a lot of love hatred towards those guys.
Right.
But yeah, they got me to actually pass the swim qual.
So your swim qual instructors were recon?
They were, yep,
Marines?
correct. Yep.
Yeah. So for when I went through, I want to say that we had the Buds guys that were our swim qual instructors, and they're pretty hardcore. Like they can breathe underwater and stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm certain
phenomenal.
of it.
Yeah, phenomenal. Phenomenal
ridiculous.
shape, phenomenal swimmers. I mean,
Yeah.
just hardcore. You know what I mean?
Did you have the diving platform?
We did. Yep. We had to dive off the platform with our full pack on, take the pack off,
Mhm.
use that as a flotation device. I did that. That okay. The problem was that when you had to dive off, you had to take your pants off
Mhm.
and then use them as a flotation device. Tie a knot in them, use them.
Right.
I would sink. So
Right.
they actually taught me how to tread water and actually be able to pass that. And I had to actually swim the length of the pool,
Mhm.
in a modified doggy paddle type
Right.
way. But yeah, it was very it wasn't easy.
Did they give you the opportunity to do the special forces swim quals?
They
Well,
did in boot camp. You
in
could.
boot
You
camp?
could go to I think class 2 and class 1 when you got to either your duty station or SOI or
Yeah.
after MCT. You could try out for that.
So I tried that during our swim qual in boot camp, and like they would just tell you you're doing it wrong, but not give you any direction. And it's like, well, tell me what you want me to do, and then yeah,
And that's how it was. I mean, basically, your guys' swim qual and our, we're in the Navy, Department of the Navy,
Mhm.
so it's pretty much the same.
yeah. That's probably one of the few similarities between Navy and Marine Corps boot camp. But so you wound up getting through your boot camp, and then did you go straight to the fleet, or where'd you go from there?
So when I left boot camp, I went home for 10 days leave, and I visited the recruiter, and he said, hey, if you want, we can submit a form for you to do 30 days of recruiting duty if you want to do that. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So then worked out good for me because I was actually able to get back into the gym for
Mhm.
30 days. And then I went back to go to Marine combat training. And that actually helped because Marine combat training was pretty tough
Yeah.
on the physical aspect.
Before we get into that, I mean, quite a bit about weight training and hitting the gym and all that other stuff. Did you feel yourself digress coming through boot camp just because you were at such peak performance going into it?
I did a little bit strength wise, but my endurance just peaked out.
Yeah.
Because we throw the packs on. We had to hump up Mount the Grim Reaper, which was like a 10-mile hump all straight up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was tough. One of the hardest things I had to do.
Yeah.
But failure wasn't an option.
Right. You're the second Marine in a row that says that. So you went to what was the schooling that you were going to after your recruiting thing?
That was Marine combat training.
Right.
Back then, the commandant of the Marine Corps, I forget his name. I should know it. I feel embarrassed that I don't know it. He wanted every Marine to be able to do infantry skills.
Okay.
So if you were what we call POG, which is a person other than grunt,
right,
you went through MCT, Marine combat training. That's where they taught you how to do infantry stuff, shoot all the weapons, learn the basic skills, and then you went to your specific MOS, your MOS school after that.
I just realized we didn't mention what era is all this going on.
I went in March of 91 and got back to duty in March of 95.
So what was going on in the world during that time?
During that time frame in early 1992, if I remember right, there was the Bosnian crisis where they were doing ethnic cleansing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was Somalia.
Okay.
And there was some other stuff going on in East Africa at the time during that time frame.
Uh-huh. So you wound up getting through Marine combat training.
I did.
Anything, what was that like?
Oh, it was tough. It was extremely hard physically because they basically mimicked the School of Infantry. So I thought I went in open contract. Backing up a little bit, I signed up for the Marine Corps during school, and I was in a delayed entry program. But after graduation, I got in a car accident, hurt my knee.
Mm-hmm.
So medically, I couldn't go. So I was waiting to get medically cleared so I could re-enlist. And during that time frame, I was getting in some trouble going down a road. A bad path. I mean, a really bad path. At one time, some of my friends came home from college, and we got a couple cases of beer, and alcohol and myself don't really work too well sometimes because there's a whole lot of bad decisions that come out of me.
Right.
So we decided to go to, it was an old sane asylum / TB building in North Muskegon, and there was a little bit of snowfall. And the two other guys didn't really want to go. They're in college and they knew it was going to be a bad choice. But I talked them into it. Peer pressure got them, and we ended up going there and walking around. And then when we were walking back, lo and behold, there was a North Muskegon police officer waiting for us.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, we had to dump the beer. Back then, he actually was pretty cool because he could have got us for minor in possession. He didn't. He did write us for a trespassing ticket. Dumped the beer, and then we ended up going to court. And the magistrate, listened to my friend's story. They're going to college, or whatever. So he waived the actual punishment, but we had to pay the fine. But with me, it was a little special case because I was lost. I didn't have a job. I basically wasn't contributing to society. So he said, "Hey, what's your plan? What's your goals?" I said, "Well, I plan on going back. I signed up for the Marine Corps, but medically I'm waiting to get cleared by a physician, and then I'm going to go back in." He said, "Okay, you got 60 days to show me that you're going in the Marine Corps, or you're going to have to pay this fine, and it's going to go on your record."
Mm-hmm.
No problem. So I called up my high school coach, who was very good friends with an orthopedic surgeon. I was able to get into him. He cleared me. Went down to the recruiting station, signed up because I got medically kicked out of the delayed entry program because of my knee. The only way I could go in was open contract.
Okay.
And with open contract is wherever the Marine Corps needs you, that's where you're going to go.
So you're pretty much enlisted without a job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then after MCT is when they actually tell you what your job is going to be.
Okay.
So I didn't care. I needed to get out of town. I needed to find structure. I needed discipline, and I wanted to be a Marine. That's what I've always wanted to do. So I signed right there, and I left 3 days later.
Mm-hmm. So, what did you wind up doing then?
After MCT, I ended up getting the School of Infantry, which was 0311, 0300 field. During that, you go through the hard, intense training with all the weapons, and then at that time, whatever you tested best with or what the Marine Corps needs were, that's where you're going to go with your 0311 infantryman, 0331 machine gunner, or 0341 mortarman. Halfway through SOI, they pulled 10 of us out and said, "Hey, we don't need grunts anymore. We need ordnancemen, aviation ordnancemen. So you guys got new orders."
So I know what that is, but for the viewers,
aviation ordnancemen, you work on the aircraft. It could be helicopters, could be fast movers, the jets. And what you do is you load the munitions, you check the weapon systems, all the avionics portions of the weapon systems you check. You load the bombs, you load the chaff and flare, missiles, rockets. That's what you do. And if you're on a helo, then you got a good chance you're the door gunner on a helicopter.
Okay. What platforms were you on?
I worked on the AV-8B Harrier, the CH-46 helicopters, and then the CH-53s. And then this was when I was on the ship, and then the Cobra gunships.
Okay. And then, for the two helicopter platforms, do you have more familiar names than those?
The CH-46, I can't remember what the nomenclature was that they called it. We just called them the 46 and the 53, Marine Corps lingo.
One of them was Huey's, though, right?
Yeah, and the Huey. We did. I forgot about that. Yeah, we did the Huey. Yep.
So, what was your like day to day like? Just like normal job focus throughout your career, I guess.
Well, when we got pulled out and we're in limbo for 2 months, which was good for me because we were waiting to go to NAS Memphis. That's where the aviation ordnance school, and that's where all any of the aircraft schools were. Mm-hmm. Navy and Marine Corps went to NAS Memphis. Well, there was like 2 months lingo where I was waiting to get orders. Well, we had orders, but we couldn't start the class until a couple months later. So I actually was able to hit the gym and get back into my powerlifting mode.
Mm-hmm.
And then that helped out from when I went to actual AO school. When we went to AO school, every day was, you had formation, then you went to class, and then you sat in class for 8 hours a day learning the weapon systems, the different bombs, all the nomenclature, how to troubleshoot wiring, just all the basic stuff, how to maintain an aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
A generic aircraft. I think back then we were working on like A4s they had in there, and I think they had F4 Phantoms that we were working on. They didn't have any F-18s or Harriers because it's the Marine Corps. They're kind of outdated. They take a little while to, but it's basically the same systems.
Mm-hmm.
Chasing wires and loading bombs.
For the Harriers, what's special about them?
With the Harriers, V-stall, so they're only used in the Marine Corps. I think they use them in Italy and a couple other. I think English use them as well.
Mhm.
But it's V-stall. They don't need a very long runway to take off. They're ground support aircraft, very maneuverable, low altitude.
Was that what you worked on the majority of the time?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So you got through A school, and then where'd you go?
Yep, I went to Cherry Point, North Carolina, with VMA 203, which is another training squadron. So when you do the basic school in Memphis, that just got you like a generic way to how to work on the planes, and then the Marine Corps would come down and say, "Hey, you're either going to be a 31 or 41," which a 41 they built the bombs and they just kind of maintained them. And 31, you actually worked hands-on the aircraft, where you actually loaded the bombs and you worked on the planes.
Okay, so it's like a secondary school.
Secondary school, yeah. So when you're in NAS Memphis, that's when they decide where you're going to go. And there was one particular point in Memphis that I think why I got to be a 31 was because we were mocking up how to load planes on a ship. So the Navy had I forget the nomenclature they had, but they had a bomb rack set in there, and they had Mark 81s, which were 250 pound bombs. And it was kind of up close to the bomb rack on the F4, I think we were loading up on. And they said, "Hey, PFC Kelsch, go over there and load this bomb." And we're getting graded. So I was the team, quote unquote, team leader, and we were supposed to use hernia bars, which are bars that go into the bomb. You kind of have two people and you kind of lift them up and get them up in the bomb rack. Well, I went over there and I grabbed the damn thing. I put it on the bomb rack. I was like, they told me to do it. Being a Marine, you just do it. And I think that's how I landed to be actually a bomb loader.
Yeah. Well, makes sense, I suppose.
So, and when I got to the fleet, I realized that too, because aviation ordnance is they're hardcore, man. They're crazy. We're crazy. I mean, the majority of us lift weights. We're just big guys.
Yeah. So did you have like any additional training on top of that once you got out into the fleet?
No. You train on the aircraft, and it's like it's mostly on the job training, more specific, but.
So what was you were on the ship? What was flight line operations like for you?
Oh, they were 24/7, because when we got orders to go to overseas, we didn't really know what was going on. We did workups prior to leaving, and we were told that we were going to replace the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit that was over off the coast of Bosnia, and we're okay, we didn't know nothing about it, So, we get loaded up on the ship and headed overseas, and day-to-day operations were, they had flight hours 24/7 for the most part. We had day crew, night crew, so you'd work 12 hours. I was day crew, so I worked 12 hours on the flight deck and, just launching aircraft,
So is this your first deployment?
Yeah,
over
it
to
was,
Bosnia?
Yeah.
So, I guess when you deployed, like what was your guys' purpose for being over there?
We weren't even told. There was just scuttlebutt saying, "Hey, word is the street. There's stuff going on in Bosnia, and there's going to be, we went with the aircraft. It's a whole fleet. So you have aircraft carrier, you have the LHD, which we were flat top, then you have a couple of other transport ships, and then you have submarines. So it's like a whole fleet go over there. We were like, the USS. We're with the USS America. We're like, those guys are going to do all the work, man. We're just here to party, and that really wasn't the case. They kind of would, the USS America would take over for a little while, for like a couple weeks, and then they would go hit port, and then we'd rotate and then take over the no-fly. Because what happened was they were doing a no-fly zone to make sure that the Serbs weren't using on any aircraft to attack anything, or any of the UN humanitarian aid stuff.
So is that what guys were doing? Was basically controlling that no-fly zone?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And then waiting for trap missions in case that a pilot got shot down, and then we'd heal off the Marines to save the pilot, rescue the pilot.
Yeah. Did any of that happen?
We had a few close calls. No, that actually happened the next MEU after we left. They ended up saving Captain O'Grady.
So, how long was your deployment for?
we were over there. I can't quite remember. We were there for like 6 or 7 months,
Okay.
if I remember right. But we bounced back and forth. You know, we'd hit port for a little while, and then, like I said, and then we spent some time in Israel too. So
Okay. So just kind of in that whole area.
yeah, in that whole little area, because
Yeah.
you know, whatever the Marine Corps said was the highest priority, that's what we did. That's
Mhm.
you know, that's what a Marine Expeditionary Unit does. You know, we're the police force of the world. So
Right. I want to take a moment to wind up talking about one of the biggest programs Hero Services has, where we offer the Hero Services Relief Fund. This is what we wound up having all of our fundraising efforts for. And this fund is available to veterans, first responders, and licensed healthcare professionals when they are needing assistance with monetary complications. The Hero Services Relief Fund can be requested through our website, and you can wind up finding the links below in the show notes. So your flight line operations, like you were just pretty much loading bombs and stuff like
loading
that.
bombs, and then what happens is if the aircraft didn't have bombs, we had to be out there just to make sure that the bomb racks were okay and safe, locked.
Mhm.
You know, tightened down. We had to do daily checks on them because you're you know, the vibration and stuff loosens up all the bolts and stuff on the aircraft. It's crazy. You know, and they land, you know, and they're flying down, landing hard on that ship. You know, it
Mhm.
just bounces everything. You know, during that time frame, they had helicopters on there too. So we were attached to actually HMM 264. So
Okay.
I was with VMA 231 out of Cherry Point, but on deployment, you get attached to the Helo Squadron.
Okay.
So I had a really good relationship with the NCO in charge of the helicopters, and I got a good report with the ordnancemen and some of the air crew, and another friend of mine that was on there too. So we started actually getting flight ops with the helicopters and learning more about the helicopters. So we didn't really work on them day to day, only when we were on deployment.
Okay.
So I was able to kind of cross train and get some flight hours and
Mhm.
and do that.
Yeah. Did you like flying?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was it was awesome.
Yeah.
You know,
I did. I did too. I wasn't on helos or anything, but yeah. So did you wind up picking up being a part of any like special teams or anything like that?
no. You're just air crews. You just, you know, if the
Mhm.
government, you know, Uncle Sam says, hey, you got to do this or that. You know, Marine Corps comes down. You just fly
Right.
out.
Did you, a part of the air crew, did you spend time on as a door gunner?
I did a little bit, yeah. I had 2 opportunities to go up, and I kept bugging the staff sergeant. I was like, hey, I got to fly in a Huey. You know, it's family tradition, man. I got to
Mhm.
get in the Huey. I got to get in the Huey. So the first time I got in the Huey, we were actually able to do quals with the minigun. So they float a target out there, and you fly around, and you know, use the minigun, you zero in on it. So that was really cool. That was my first flight in a Huey. I was actually able to use the minigun. You know, so that was really cool. The second time was a very significant event happened.
You want to talk about that?
Yeah, we can talk about that. Yeah. So the second time, I was able to go up in a Huey. There, we were told that we had to do security for some humanitarian aid that was getting dropped off.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, cool. You know, don't know what we're gonna do, but you know, we'll do it. So we loaded up the aircraft, did flight checks. You know, we started flying around. And one of the things was we were flying security with the Cobra helicopters, and I think there were some fast movers up top. And we were supposed to look out for anything that could potentially be a threat to the humanitarian aid that was getting dropped off. So as we're flying, the pilot saw a truck coming up. He radioed over to the other, to the Cobra gunship, I think it was, if I remember right. But he was already going around, so he didn't quite get it. So by the time we got around, I actually saw a visual. And I said, hey, you know, something looks suspicious in the back of this truck. Something's going on. And we fly back around. And at that point, one of the other helicopters said, hey, I got visual. Something's not good. And then when we got around, we actually saw the guy. It was a mortar. There was mortars in the back of a truck. And then they were launching mortars onto the civilians that were there to get humanitarian aid. We requested to return fire and we got denied.
Got denied?
We got denied, yeah. They said rules of engagement didn't count. We weren't actually getting fired at.
Was that pretty standard for your deployment?
I didn't know it at the time, but it was then, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if we weren't getting fired upon, we couldn't return fire.
So you just kind of had to sit there and watch it happen.
We had to sit there and watch it, yeah. Which is totally against what, you know, you go in the Marine Corps for. You're a police force of the world. And you can't engage on something that's happening in front of you. And that affected me, you know, for a long time. Still affects me to this day.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had the opportunity to take care of something. And we saw the threat and we didn't.
Yeah.
And we couldn't do anything.
It, not only does it go against your nature as a Marine, but just going against your nature as a person. Really.
Yeah, correct. It's just a moral thing to do.
Yeah.
You're here there to protect, and we couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was one of the only incidences that we flew security again after that. And then I think the USS America took over from there.
Okay.
From what I understand, like later on, they changed the rules of engagement. But we were really the second Marine Expeditionary Unit over there. The American public didn't even know what was going on until after we had left. The next Marine Expeditionary Unit, and they had, it was a little bit different for them.
Yeah.
Because the Serbs amped up what they were doing over there, and then.
So you were there very early.
Very early, yeah. Very, very early.
Okay. So you wound up getting back to the ship and stuff like that. If I remember correctly, you were a part of a couple reclamation teams too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Later on, after we did our deployment, I was on the reclamation team. Now, prior to leaving for deployment, we'll rewind. I went to, after A school, I went through VMA 203. Then I went to my first Harrier squadron, which was VMA 542. I was there for 2 days, and then the gunny that was in charge of us said, "Hey, you're going to be the new, you're going to be part of the reclamation team."
So define what that is.
So a reclamation team is they take Marines from each shop, and if a plane crashes or there's something that needs to be cleaned up chemically or anything like that, you are part of that team to clean it up. So if a plane crashes, you're there to help get the body. You're there to get the plane parts. You're there to take care of the plane, guard the plane, and make sure that it gets brought back to the base safely.
Mm-hmm.
And all accounted for.
Yeah. To kind of, there's a lot of levels as far as like why that's so critical, because not only are you trying to reclaim everything of that crash, but you're also preventing further crashes, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So
Yep.
One thing on a flight line is you can't leave a whole bunch of what's called FOD, which is just any type of a object out on the flight line, else it'll cause more further crashes. So, do you have anything in relation to like figuring out how that crash occurred?
Yeah, they do that at a different level of inspection.
Okay.
So on the fourth day I was with VMA 542, VMA 231 had a plane crash.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember. It was in like a swamp area. To this day, I kind of don't really remember. But we were told that, hey, you got to go. We're going to bust, we're going to get in the Humvees. We're taking you out here. You guys got to, do your thing out there. So when we got out there, they started to bring, engineers brought some cranes in to try to get the plane out of the marsh. They couldn't because it was so swampy. So we had to wait for the next day for engineers to come in and put platforms out from engineers from the Camp Lejeune to come out and put platforms. So we didn't actually get the plane out for about 3 days. We were out there day and night, guarding this plane. But it was very peculiar because unfortunately the pilot was still in it. So, that was my first encounter with a plane crash and death, and
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't my last. I had to help extract the pilot out, and that stuck with me for a very, very, it still sticks with me today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was Captain Augusta. That was in August of 1992.
And he was in a swamp.
He was in a swamp, yeah.
So we wound up getting the plane out and stuff like that. Like, what happens once you guys wound up getting that actually removed from the area of where it happened?
Yep. So when we get it out, we get it back to the base. It goes to a higher level of maintenance. So then they strip the plane down to the bare bones. I mean, everything. I mean, they basically just take it down to where it was, to just the frame, and everything's all out of it. Then they inspect the frame, and then they put all new parts back on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they try to figure out like what happened. Was it pilot error? Was it malfunction? And then they make the determination, and then they put the plane back together, and they send it back to the squadron.
If you don't mind me asking, at what point was Captain Augusta extricated, I guess would be
it was the day that we got the plane out. I can't remember if it was I would think it was the third day, I believe, from my memory recalls. Yeah. I know that one of the good things about the situation was I became really good friends with the guys from 231. And that's another story there. But I ended up actually, literally, I was only in 542 the next week, and I went over to 231 and talked to their master sergeant that was in charge of the ordnance shop, because they were going to go on a deployment, which was that MEU.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to him. I said, "Hey, I want to go." I said, "I really fit in with you guys, and is there any way that you can make this happen? Can you get my orders changed?" And luckily, there was a guy that had only a couple months left, but they had extended his contract because they wanted him to go on that deployment. The Marine Corps did, and I was able to take his place.
Okay.
So that's how I got into VMA 231.
Uh-huh.
And then went on the deployment.
Yeah. How old were you when
I was 19 years old?
And you said that was after just being a part of the reclamation team for just a few days.
Just a few days, yeah.
Yeah.
It was just literally like 2 days.
Was that your first major incident?
That was the first major incident. Yep. And it wasn't the last.
Yeah. At 19 years old, going through that. So, is there more? You said that there's another incident?
Yeah, there's a few more. Yeah.
Well, you want to talk about those?
Yeah, sure. The other one happened in August the following year, in '93. Captain Delaney.
And this was while you were deployed in Bosnia?
No, this was after we got back.
Okay.
So, Captain Delaney was a very Marines man, very kind. He was a captain, but he was a pilot, and he would come to all the shops and he would talk to everybody, because it's just the type of one he was. But for whatever reason, he always came up to me and really asked me like personal questions, like, hey, how was your night? How'd you do? Do you need anything? He always sought me out. Every day that he was there, he always came up to me and talked to me, and we had a good bond. And
I'm gonna interrupt you a little bit. Just for the aviation community, that's pretty normal for an officer and an enlisted to be at least sociable with each other when they're like pilot and mechanic.
Correct.
That's how it was for me. So
Yep.
I know with a lot of the other branches, it's like a very hard, strict line that there's no fraternization. The enlisted stay with the enlisted, officers stay with the officers. With the aviation community, I don't want to say that it's blurred, but it's not as strictly enforced, just because I think that we correlate a little bit closer with each other.
Yeah, correct.
You
got to figure. We're working on $21 million aircraft that, they're putting their lives in the hands of, 18, 19, 20, 23-year-old men.
Yeah. And they're 23, 24, 25.
Right. So it's kind of, it's just a tight knit community.
Mm-hmm.
It really truly is.
It was for us too.
Yeah.
Our officers or our pilots, we were pretty close with, but I just wanted to convey that for maybe some of the other military people listen.
Yep. So we had a 96 coming up, and night crew does most of the aircraft checks. And the way our 96 worked was the day before night crew got to go on there and start their 96, and then day crew would start theirs at like noon. We'd have formation, and Sergeant Major and Commanding Officer would release us. But we did flight ops, from like 6 o'clock in the morning until noon, because the Marine Corps is going to get their time out of you. So they got it, and the pilots need to get their flight hours in, and then of course we need to get our hours in of working on the jets and stuff. So we knew that his plane we didn't know that was going to be his plane, but there was one plane that needed to have checks done. The night crew couldn't get to it, so 4 of us: avionics, hydraulics, I was an ordnance man, and then metal shop. So we have to actually inspect the plane, make sure everything's all good. Weapons checks. They check the avionics with testers, all that stuff to say it's good to go. So that early that morning, we did quick checks on it, and it was good to go. Plane was good. So then I was with those same guys. We had to go to the pits. The pits is where you go when the jets come in, you refuel them. Mm-hmm. So they do touch and goes, landing, do whatever their thing, and if they're going to fly back out, then we refuel them. Or if they're going to put the jet away for the day, we refuel them before they go back to the squadron. So as the planes were taking off that day, Captain Delaney, I forget what when he took off, but we were like, oh yeah, that's Captain Delaney. I think he was one of the last pilots to actually, when he landed, we're gonna, go back, secure the bird, and start our weekend liberty. So we're kind of waiting, we're in the pits, just smoking and joking, thinking, we weren't smoking, but that's what we call it in Marine Corps, laughing and joking around, thinking, okay, we're gonna go out and party all weekend. This is gonna be a good day, you know what I mean? This is gonna be fun, nice weather. It's supposed to be nice out all weekend. We're gonna hit the beach. Not the case. When he flew by, did a touch, came back around. 10 minutes later, he did his thing, came back around. The Harrier didn't sound right. It had a very distinctive. Harriers have a distinctive sound when they're not doing very well mechanically, and we all looked up at the same time, and we saw the plane do a nosedive. And this is about maybe not very far from where we're at. And then we're like, holy shit, not good. So we instantly, training kicked in. We grabbed the fire extinguisher, which, by the way, is crazy because it looks like it's made from the 1900s because it's big old beast, and it had literally wagon wheels on it. We always joked about it. Like, we ain't never gonna be able to push this thing, but by golly, the doggone thing pushed with ease. I grabbed it, and I'm running out to the plane, and he ejected. And by the time we got there, we couldn't. The plane was engulfed in flames so much, and there was nothing that we could do. And he burned alive in front of us, and that hit me hard, and it haunts me to this day. And there's nothing I could do, nothing we could do. I blamed myself, and the others blamed themselves for, did we miss something on the plane? Didn't we do our checks right? Did we, a lot of what ifs, a lot of maybes that I've held for years. But
yeah,
it was a rough time. Marine brothers, in his peacetime, it's never easy to lose a Marine brother or anybody in particular, even any branch of service, but in peacetime, it's not supposed to happen. Yeah, it's not supposed to happen.
So, with your other guys that were on that scene, that evolution, whatever you wanted to call it, how'd you guys band together afterwards?
It's really strange. We did, but yet we didn't. We kept it all to ourselves. You know what I mean? We kind of never really talked about it because, in the Marine Corps is you move forward. Shit happens, you move forward.
Yeah.
And I know it's greatly affected those other guys throughout the years, but it's just you didn't want to become weak. You know what I mean? It's just the Marine Corps isn't that way. You dealt with it and you moved on. The next day's there.
And I think, like, with that type of culture, the military culture is like you're young enough to like not really be able to make best decisions on your own to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. So you're just kind of going off from what was portrayed from others. And like you said, it's always just, move forward, don't really talk about it, that sort of thing. But I think as we wound up getting older, you wound up having that opportunity to wound up having some self-reflection and being able to band together and talk about things a little bit, more going forward. So, so when you end up getting through all of that, what was the rest of your enlistment like?
Yeah, we actually had there was another crash that happened. It was on Lyman Road. I can't remember the date or the specific year, but they were doing touch and goes on Lyman Road, and I can't remember the pilot's name. But again, we were there, and it crashed. It had a hard landing, and then it caught a fire, and we were actually able to get that pilot out. He was severely burned. I believe he lost his leg and his arm. I never knew what happened to him until like a couple years ago. I Googled the hell out of it, and I was able to find it. And he actually lived. He's missing an arm and a leg, and which I was kind of happy to know that one of the Marines I was with, he actually was able to get him out and save his life before, and miraculously he never got burnt. I don't know how.
The Marine that got him out?
Got him out, yeah. Yep.
So, what was your involvement with that?
We were just trying to extinguish the fire.
Okay, so you were essentially doing fire attack or whatever.
Yeah, yep.
So, did you know the pilot?
I really didn't. I don't even remember his name, to be honest with you. I just kind of blocked it out. I just, after we got him out, I was just like, okay, we bettered ourselves this time.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, having having a save. Wish I wish you would have been able to know that like right away.
Right. Yeah.
That would have been probably really impactful for you as far as uplifting, knowing what happened and stuff like that, which is something that we hear a lot of people talk about, especially on the first responder side. Is a lot of times that you don't know what happens to you know, the individuals that you've helped in whatever manner that you did. So, but good. I'm glad that he's still around. How long ago did you find out?
I think it was like 2 years ago.
Okay.
I was talking to the Marine online, and he mentioned the pilot's name. Then I kind of Googled him, and I found out he actually was doing a podcast talking about the crash.
Yeah.
And I listened to that, and I was like, okay, you know.
So, how many years after the actual? So the plane crash happened when?
I think it was 94. I think maybe early 95. I don't
Yeah.
I don't really remember.
So a significant amount of time.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. We're talking what 20 plus years.
Yeah, 20 plus years. Yeah.
Yeah, 25 plus years.
Yeah, I kept everything inside. And then that's when I started my journey of actually, getting help.
Mm-hmm.
It was a couple years ago.
We want to thank you for tuning in to the Heroes Debrief and sitting down with Tom as he wound up telling us his story. You can continue and listen to the rest of his story in the upcoming episodes, which are linked in the comments below. At this point in time, we want to thank our sponsors, Window World, Bathworks, and Paul Davis for showing their support to our organization. These companies have not only supported Hero Services in the context of sponsoring our events, but show support to our organization as a whole and allowing us to end up having the Heroes Debrief. We ask that you help our organization by liking, commenting, and subscribing to our channel, and be sure to hit the bell icon to be notified for future episodes. Connect with Hero Services in the links below on our webpage and our social media accounts.